Well, over the weekend, I saw interesting news. The chief Mexican trade negotiator was working feverishly on a Sunday to get a successor agreement with Washington to replace the NAFTA deal. Politicians working on Sundays, that sounds like a deal was imminent, and indeed it was. Today, Donald Trump summoned the media to the Oval Office, called the Mexican president on the speakerphone, and announced a new bilateral deal. Here, take a look at what Trump said from the White House.
Canada will start negotiations shortly. I'll be calling the Prime Minister very soon, and we'll start negotiation. And if they'd like to negotiate fairly, we'll do that. You know, they have tariffs of almost 300% on some of our dairy products, so we can't have that. We're not going to stand for that. I think with Canada, frankly, the easiest thing we can do is to tariff their cars coming in. It's a tremendous amount of money, and it's a very simple negotiation. It could end in one day, and we take in a lot of money the following day. But I think we'll give them a chance to probably have a separate deal. We could have a separate deal, or we could put it into this deal. I like to call this deal the United States-Mexico Trade Agreement. I think it's an elegant name. I think NAFTA has a lot of bad connotations for the United States because it was a ripoff. It was a deal that was a horrible deal for our country. And I think it's got a lot of bad connotations to a lot of people. And so we will probably, you and I will agree to the name. We will see whether or not we decide to put up Canada or just do a separate deal with Canada if they want to make the deal. The simplest deal is more or less already made. It'd be very easy to do.
Just to make it clear, he was speaking into his speakerphone there with the president, the outgoing president of Mexico. Now, before I introduce you our expert guest on this subject, my favorite guest, I think you know who I'm going to introduce in a minute, I want to show you Chrystia Freeland, Canada's foreign minister. By the way, Justin Trudeau, his official itinerary today says he's busy in private meetings. They don't say where, but here's what Chrystia Freeland thought would be appropriate to tweet today. Let me read you the words and explain the image. She says, "A great privilege for me to address the annual meeting of German ambassadors in Berlin today. Thank you, Heiko Maas, for the invitation. Canada and Germany must work together to defend the multilateral, rules-based international order." And you could see Chrystia Freeland there in her white dress, and a couple of people behind him is Stéphane Dion. I checked this morning, and total Canadian exports to Germany are about $3.5 billion, or about 1/100th of our trade with America. It's not just that Germany is a rounding error when it comes to Canadian trade. The subject matter of her speech is an oblique swipe at Donald Trump. You heard Trump believes in bilateral deals, Canada-Mexico, USA-Mexico, USA-Canada. This is a reprise of her anti-Trump speech that won her Diplomat of the Year award. Well, who's the Diplomat of the Year today? I'd like to know that Mexican a bit more. Joining us now, without further ado, is our good friend Manny Montenegrino. He's the president and CEO of Think Sharp Incorporated, and he has given us outstanding guidance over the past months on this NAFTA negotiation. Manny, let me turn it over to you. There's so much to chew over. Have at it.
Well, I'll simply state that I've been dead right on this for a year. And since your broadcast, a couple months, I have been talking about this specifically and what will happen. And let's start from the beginning. Donald Trump was very clear and said, Canada is not the problem. Mexico is the problem. And what he meant by that was trade deficit with Mexico was $50 billion. And somewhere's up to $60 billion at times. And Mexico has a different culture, a different environmental laws, a different labor laws, everything a very difficult agreement to achieve. Canada, in comparison, was very easy to do. And Trump wanted to do it with Canada and said, let's just do a bilateral agreement. Now, Ezra, remember, the Prime Minister stood up time and time again saying that he will not do a deal without Mexico. Well, that was not truthful. What was he's trying to say, and I have said this, it is my opinion, and I have gathered evidence after evidence, and I have it on my pinned tweets. There are now 42 tweets of partial evidence that this was done intentionally to make Trump look bad. And if you make Trump look bad as a negotiator, as a bully, as mean, that looks good for Trudeau because he gets the Trump votes in Canada. Well, Trump did an end run. He's actually not mean. He's not a bully. He actually did a deal with Mexico, which was inconceivable. If you look at the disparity between Mexico and USA in its laws, in its markets, in its language, everything. But Trump did a deal, a fair deal, that both Mexico and USA signed and will approve.
Mm-hmm. You know, Manny, we have some highlights of the deal as released by the White House. I'm just going to put them up. I know that neither you nor I have had a chance to really dig into the details. This is literally in the last hour or so this has been published. There's interesting rules, for example, to encourage the percentage of automobiles made in the United States or Mexico. I take that as a rule against, let's say, China making parts, shipping them to Mexico, having them assembled there and sent into Canada, into the U.S. That's my first.
Yeah, there are two, Ezra. And there's so much, and we have so little time. I'm going to focus on 2 points. Number one was, remarkably, the United States of America is asking Mexico to increase the cost of labor, i.e., give greater wages to Mexicans building cars. Mm-hmm. What a laudable thing to do. What a great thing to do. And they had done that. And Mexican wages on car production will go up 40 to 45%. That's part of the agreement. Now, Ezra, I have on my pinned tweet number 12, when this issue was raised when Canada was in the discussions, the lead trade negotiator for the United States said, we need to have the labor costs higher in cars built in Mexico, improving Mexico's standard, and Canada was against it. Huh. The labor negotiator for the United States was dumbfounded, couldn't believe that Canada would not be part of raising the bar of every employee in Mexico. That's when I conclude, I mean, there are many times I concluded, but that was one of the biggest smoking guns to tell me that Canada is not negotiating honestly. Canada is simply trying to thwart at every possible way. And when I say Canada, I love this country, not Canada, the Prime Minister and his team trying to thwart the deal in every possible way. And now we have Trump, and here's the worst part, Ezra. I mean, I've been in many negotiations in my life, and I'm watching Trump just brilliantly with this. He's now got a deal with Mexico. Not only does he presents that to Canada, and Canada has no more leverage, no more negotiation, no more abilities, and he knows that, and he knows that Prime Minister Trudeau will not move on the dairy, will not move on very other clauses, and he gets to put his tariffs on car, which is what I have been saying from the beginning. Trump wants to bring cars to Michigan. Mm-hmm. Michigan and Ohio gave him the presidency, and he wants to bring the car manufacturing back. The tariff is the first step. Yes, it's going to cause pain to a lot of people, but in the very short, long term, the manufacturing will happen in America, and that's Trump's goal. And that was handed to him by the Prime Minister.
Right. Let's put up those summaries again, that second panel we had that talks about Trump insisting that Mexicans pay their people. You can see right at the top there, this deal uses trade rules to drive higher wages by requiring that 40 to 45% of auto content be made by workers earning at least $16 per hour. So Trump is saying, hey, Mexico, you have to pay your people a living wage, and either they will, and that'll actually remarkably help Mexican workers, or the car companies will say, well, hey, if we're paying, almost American wages, why don't we actually build the things in America? And this is how Trump won the blue-collar votes in places like Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, because that headline I just showed there could have been a Democrat. That could have been a pro-labor union Democrat over the course of the last 40 years. But Trump's the one who actually did it. That's what's so interesting. Yeah, he's a Republican, and on certain things he's very right-wing. But boy, he's there for the working men and women of the American Auto Workers Union.
Well, yeah, in addition, there's another aspect to it. The higher the wages are to build a car in Mexico, the easier it is to build cars in America.
Right.
I mean, if you have a parallel system where everyone gets paid the same wage, and then why not start building the cars? So yes, it helps the Mexican economy. Yes, it helps Mexican labor and Mexican worker make more money and raises the tide. And there's a beneficial aspect. And if people make more money in Mexico, they will not be leaving Mexico. So there's that aspect. But the other aspect is it lets the American builder, the American worker compete on a fair basis. So Trump's got two wins there. Mm-hmm. Canada's watching. Canada does not understand. And I mean, Ezra, I have, as you know, for over a year, called every step. And it's brilliant what Trump has done. It is frightening what our prime minister has done in these negotiations. And he cannot. And the media, the media in Canada cannot say, oh, look, Trump is a bully. Yeah. Oh, look, Trump does not negotiate. Yeah. Well, Trump has done deals with South Korea, with Japan. China is there on bended knee. They don't want. Europe is doing. Trump has done very honest and fair deals with everyone in the world except their best friend, their neighbor, their biggest trading partner. And it is not Trump. Yeah. It is not United States. It is Canada. It is Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, you're so right. I mean, if you were to judge Trump solely by his Twitter feed, you would say, oh, he hates Mexico. He never stops talking about build the wall. On Cinco de Mayo, he posed with a big smile eating a taco bowl from Trump Tower, which some people took as an ethnic slight. I mean, if you thought that was all there was to Trump, today you would be shocked that he actually did a deal with Mexico. But that's Trump. He's a deal maker, and he knows the uses of hyperbole. Remember, he was calling Kim Jong-un Little Rocket Man. And then, you know, yeah. by saber rattling, now it looks like he's on the way to getting a deal there. Trump, the funny thing about Trump is he will do a deal with anyone if it's in his interest, even if he badmouthed them the week before. Justin Trudeau won't do a deal with Trump. I think it's not the other way around. It's Trudeau that's the obstinate one.
Well, here's the evidence, Ezra. It's very clear. Not every country understands the vulnerability that they're at. China has close to $400 to $500 billion worth of surpluses to America. They know that Trump has the advantage. So they know that. And that's true of South Korea. That's true of Japan. That's true of Germany. That's true of EU. That's true of Mexico. But nowhere in those countries is anyone campaigning on the Trump hate vote. So their politicians are actually working for their people. Mexico understands it. Look, the Trump hate vote means nothing. We just had an election. We got to get jobs and deals for Mexico. China, they don't have these Trump hate votes to pander for. They're dealing in the long term and see their vulnerability. China is on bended knee, understands that they can't win a trade war because a tariff war, I would say, if there's a tariff war, they're putting a tariff. China's putting a tariff on $100 billion worth of goods. America puts tariffs on $500 billion of goods. Who's going to win that? Yeah. Of course, the U.S. is. China understands it.
You know, let me remark on Mexico because they just had a new presidential election. They're in that interim period while the old president, Enrique Peña Nieto, if I'm saying his name right, he's a lame duck. He's gone in a couple months.
Right.
The new president is in. Neither of them likes Trump, but both of them have been working together, the outgoing president and the president-elect. They're rivals, obviously, but they were working together with Trump, who they both, I suppose, emotionally hate, maybe, I don't know, but they swallowed whatever political partisanship they had between each other and towards Trump. They worked weekends. They got a deal. If they can get a deal, if all these other countries that on the face of it might not like Trump or whatever, they put their national interests first. And whereas Trudeau is constantly virtue signaling against Trump, and Chrystia Freeland is tweaking Trump's nose. I'm in Germany with my real friends today. It's frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is. And Canada, once again, stands alone. Yeah. I mean, this great country used to lead. This great country was admired. We had a debacle with the Saudi Arabia tweets where the country didn't stand behind Canada, where the countries did not stand behind Canada. Now on trade, now there's another point that I want to give to you, Ezra. Every month that goes by that we don't have a trade deal, some entrepreneurs saying, let's put our billion-dollar factory where? And they want certainty. You know, the great irony is that our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, didn't want that 5-year sunset clause because it creates uncertainty. Well, a year without negotiations and now a deal with Mexico is the biggest uncertainty for people. And what will be happening is businessmen will say, hey, things are looking good with Mexico. Let's put the plant in Mexico. Things are looking good. And you know what? We don't know what's happening. Let's go to America and put our plant. We can't put our plant in Canada. And that means that uncertainty, our billions of dollars are flowing out. We won't see the numbers today, but years from now or months from now, we're going to see that our GDP, it's already weakening. We're at 1.5%. America's at 4.1. It's just going to get worse. You know, businessmen know they are thinking forward and they make deals today. That's what Trump is doing.
Yeah. You know, I could talk to you all day about this, Manny, but I know that you, I mean, I love it. And everything you say is, it's contrary to the conventional wisdom in the media party, which has been wrong every step of the way. I got one last question for you.
Yeah.
You heard the clip we played at the very beginning of our interview, an extended clip from Trump talking to the Mexican president, but he certainly was emphasizing Canada, wasn't he? And he basically said, we're going to hit the auto sector if they don't free up on dairy. And he said, let's just go tariff-free. I mean, he's begging Canada for a deal. He's not begging. Trump doesn't beg. He's saying, let's get a deal, but if not, that's fine. Here's a prediction. Here's a scenario I have. I'd like your thought on it. I think Trump is not a bluffer when it comes to tariff. Anyone who thinks he's a bluffer hasn't been paying attention to what he's been doing to Canada, to China, and other countries. Mexico certainly doesn't think he's a bluffer. What would happen if Donald Trump were to carry through and put a 20% tariff on Canada's cars and say that tariff remains until, number one, you get rid of your dairy quotas, and number two, you come in and give us a copycat deal to what we just did with Mexico? My theory, Manny, and I'd love your thoughts, especially if you disagree with me, I want to know why. My theory is Justin Trudeau will suddenly have the first enormous crisis on his hands. Our stock market will plunge, and the auto workers and everyone grown up will say, you've got to submit or our economy is doomed. And I think he will finally abandon the dairy cartel and submit to Trump's great offer of a tariff-free economy. So I think Trump's going to smack us and Trudeau's going to blink. That's my prediction. What do you think?
Well, I'm going to go a bit further than you. I have studied Trump for 3 years, and I have been bang on everything he's done. I think Trump doesn't really care about the dairy. It's a small part. Yes, it helps him. I think he picks the most intransigent point of Justin Trudeau so he can put his tariffs on. He is smart. He's saying, I've done this in negotiations where I knew that someone didn't want to move on a point, and I said, and I wanted out of the deal, or I wanted to do something different. Then I stuck to that point. Trump is sticking to dairy because dairy has divided the Conservative Party. Dairy has got Justin Trudeau. I mean, I don't know what it is with milk in Canada. I don't get it. But in any event, dairy has become bigger than maple syrup in Canada. And Trump knows it. And Trump is sitting there saying, I will take the toughest point. There's better leveraging with banks and with telecoms. He could sit there and say, get rid of your telecom barrier. He didn't. That's much bigger than dairy. No, he's picking dairy because he knows, and he's not a stupid man, that for some reason dairy is like the maple leaf in Canada, and all politicians will be behind dairy, and that means he gets to put on his tariffs. And once he gets to put on his tariffs, he ain't going back. He's got it, and he's not going to say, well, no, there's no, we've got this, and look at this, it's worked. And he'll change the tune. It's working real well for America, and blah, blah, blah. So that theory of mine is just frightening. But in my review, this is what this great negotiator is doing.
You know, you have just terrified me, and you have just convinced me, because you're right. I mean, dairy, he loves the fact that he looks like he's fighting for Wisconsin and places that he won. But you are so right. If he could scoop up our factories that make cars, move them to the States, that's actually the outcome he wants.
That's $100 billion to America. The dairy farming industry in America is tough, and there's ways to deal with it. But to take $100 billion, or maybe $200 billion, if you add all the ancillary businesses, that's a big score.
You're right. Trump does not want a deal, and he's counting on Trudeau to be intransigent. He's banking on it to justify grabbing our factories.
Well,
Manny, you're so right, and it's clear as day now that you say it.
Well, here's the point. I mean, if you think about it, right from the beginning, Trump tried to do tariffs a year ago on cars. It didn't work. Now he has not the legitimate authority. He did a deal with Mexico. He can walk in and say, you know what? Canada's been wrong, and he has now the moral support to go after our cars, which he didn't have before. Yeah. We actually handed it to him. Yeah. I've been right on every step. I fear, and listen, Ezra, I will tell you, I am so saddened this week. I am so depressed.
Wow.
I fear that this is going to happen.
Manny, it's been a while since I've read The Art of the Deal. That's Trump's book about how he likes to do deals. And what you have just described is exactly how I think he will later write about this in his post-presidential autobiography, The Art of Many Deals, or whatever it'll be called. You were right, and I lament the 160,000 Ontarians who will pay the price with their own jobs, according to the banks. Man, it's great to talk to you again. Thank you so much for bringing the smarts as you do on this file all the time.
Great. Thank you, Ezra.
All right. There's our friend Manny Montenegrino. Wow. I did not think of that. I think he's right. I think he's right about Trump's real negotiating strategy. What do you think? Let me know in the comments section below. And take the time to go to Manny's Twitter feed and look through his collected wisdom on this subject. He has done several YouTube videos with us. All of them have been viral hits. You wouldn't expect a 20-minute conversation about international trade to go viral, but I think it's because it's the other side of the story as opposed to the conventional wisdom in our Ottawa press corps. That's an excerpt from my daily TV show, The Ezra Levant Show. Normally it's behind a paywall, but I thought you'd like this video, so we put it on YouTube. If you want to subscribe to watch the daily show every day, including always 2 interviews a day, and I read my hate mail, just click on this screen and become a premium member.